Mayor Mike Duggan on Detroit's future, the educational outlook for Michigan, and a conversation about Detroit's resurgence. Stay put, MiWeek starts right now.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We are coming to you today from the 4th Annual Detroit Policy Conference at the Motor City Casino and Hotel. It is hosted by the Detroit Regional Chamber and brings together business community and political leaders to talk about revitalizing the city. So coming up, Mayor Mike Duggan joins us to talk about rebuilding Detroit after bankruptcy and his plans going forward. Plus, we all want good schools for our children. We will talk with Governor Snyder's advisor, Pastorek, about the state of education in Michigan. And a conversation about working together to maintain Detroit's momentum. It is all coming up for you on MiWeek. Well, this week, Mayor Mike Duggan presented the fiscal 2016 budget to City Council. It is a budget that was prepared by former emergency manager Kevin Orr, but it's up to the mayor to make sure the budget is balanced. Today, the mayor delivered opening remarks at the policy conference, and we are pleased to have him with us here today. Mayor Duggan, thanks so much for joining us on MiWeek.
Thank you for having me, Christy.
And of course, we have our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley, the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. All right, let's jump in. You started off the policy conference saying the us versus them politics is over. There's a new conversation happening here in Detroit and in the region. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think if you just look at the stories on TV and the newspapers, how little of the nasty, divisive language you've seen in the last year, it has changed dramatically, and it's allowed us to do things like pass a really good bill to deal with scrap metal on a bipartisan basis, to pass a bill that is going to allow us to head off thousands of these foreclosures by restructuring the payments, another bill that has created a tax-free zone to bring new manufacturing business to the east side. Every one of them passed with Republican and Democrat, city, suburban, labor, business partnership, and I think people in the city are embracing this tone.
So why is that happening then? What has been the change, do you think, in the past year?
Well, I think the change occurred on the campaign trail, in which we had two candidates who offered two different approaches, and the people of the city spoke in pretty big numbers. But now I think you can see pretty much everybody embracing this direction. It's far more productive to work together and solve our problems than to be attacking each other.
Collaboration is great, but you also need money to make a city run and to do the things that you've talked about doing in Detroit. You have a little more wiggle room because of the bankruptcy. There's federal money for demolition, but there's a lot of things on your list that seem like they need funding. Where's that going to come from?
Well, I mean, we still have the same problems as a city we had before the bankruptcy. You know, we have a lot of vacancies in homes. We've got a significant crime problem, and we still haven't got the population growing. But all of those things we're working on, and we've got a balanced budget. We got a little bit of flexibility, and if we keep doing what we're doing, I think you're going to see people and businesses keep moving back into the city.
How confident are you that the population decline, which is a 50-year trend, can actually turn around? I mean, you have said before, and I keep sort of shuddering every time you say it, that within 4 years, you want to see that number moving in the opposite direction. It has not done that since 1950. Is that realistic?
It has to be because I've committed to it.
Right.
But I do believe by the end of my 4 years, we'll have the population in Detroit growing. But I think that's what a mayor should be judged on. If more people want to leave your city than come in, what are you doing as a leader? But I get data every month from DTE on electrical hookups. We are shallowing out significantly.
In terms of the law.
In terms of people leaving versus those coming.
Right.
I got the most current data, and I don't think we're that far away, but we're going to find out. But it is really the most powerful statistic I saw this year was that 25 neighborhoods in Detroit have started to grow in property values. That tells you got 25 neighborhoods with more people coming in than going out.
Yeah, you said that during the State of the City, and I tried to think it through my head to name those neighborhoods. That's a lot more than I think most people would think of. What are some of the places where you're seeing
I got
that?
a nice map of it, I'm very familiar, but it's the areas we've been concentrating on with our demolitions and our nuisance abatement suits. But it's Rosedale, and it's Grandmont, and it's East English Village, and it's Sherwood Forest, and it's Green Acres, and it's Bagley, and it's an area out near 8 Mile and Evergreen, and it's spaced in the neighborhoods that you would think. But the fact that 25 are growing, if I'm sitting here a year from now and 50 are growing in property values, it's not going to seem like such a far-fetched idea because people are moving into downtown and Midtown.
Sure.
The key is we want them to stay in the neighborhoods.
Stop
and I think
the loss in the neighborhood.
it's starting to happen.
Now, your challenge is convincing people in the neighborhoods to stay long enough for you to fix public safety, to rid the city of blight, to shore up their neighborhoods, to stabilize transportation. Do you get a sense that people are buying in, that they're believing that things are going to get better?
There's no question. I mean, if you want to spend a day with me, we can go into any neighborhood in this city. I go in without security, and people will come up and talk to me. They will start off by saying, things are better, I'm glad about my street lights, you got the illegal dump site, what about the dead tree? And so they go right on to the next thing we need to do. But the interesting thing is, people expect me to fix it now. I think the expectations are higher for city government. It means the criticism level is higher, but we expect that.
So are they asking you, what about schools? What are you going to do about schools?
They are.
What do you say?
What I'm saying is just an honest answer, which is I have so much responsibility right now, there's so much work still to do on police and fire and buses that I don't have the capacity to run the schools. On the other hand, I think there could be a role for the mayor in a kind of an authorizing role, approving new schools where they're open, getting new schools placed where we don't have any, maybe providing transportation to schools, but not running the
But you
schools
can't
itself.
grow this city until something happens with the schools.
It certainly is an important piece. But I'm very realistic in what am I capable of doing each year, what's our capacity. I really try hard to promise what I know I can deliver, and I just don't have the capacity in the next 12 months to operate schools.
Talking a little bit about public safety and taking a look at your budget, there weren't a lot of surprises in the budget presentation, but there are increases in spending for police and for fire. What can you tell Detroit residents to expect where that extra money is going to be going and where they're going to be able to see that?
I do believe we'll have 200 more police officers on the street this year, and it comes not just from the extra funding, but the unions agreed that we could take the cops who are filling out payroll with pencil and paper right now, the cops who are dispatching cars, move them to the street and bring them in with trained civilians. Now that's easier to say than it is to do. You got to hire people, you got to train them, you got to integrate them into a new system, but we are steadily working on that, and every week we're moving more civilians and part-time former police officers into jobs and moving the cops back out of the streets.
I want to take a look at something else from the budget. Taking a look at the property tax revenue was a little bit higher than anticipated, but then the income tax revenue was a little bit lower. How do you account for that discrepancy and that change in both of those areas?
I think the property taxes are going to continue to go higher. We are seeing people paying their taxes at a higher rate than we have in recent years. The Detroit News did a story about a year ago that half the people in Detroit weren't paying their property taxes. Those numbers are coming up, part because I think we cut the assessments, part because I think people are believing in their neighborhoods and see the property values coming back. So we know why property taxes are going up. Our income tax enforcement process is very weak. And I think we probably got people living in the city who aren't claiming a city address. I think we got people living in the city working in the suburbs where the suburban companies aren't withholding the taxes. I think we have people who are working in the city and claiming they're working from home. I think you have people getting 1099s who should be filling out W-2s. And so this year is going to be the year we completely reinvigorate the collection process.
Early in your administration made a real effort to move houses, abandoned houses, from the city's roles to individual owners. And I know that a lot of those people have had a hard time, though, getting mortgages that they need to fix the houses up. You know, it's like you solve one problem and you just sort of uncover another one.
That's exactly what it is.
And I know that the banks, the traditional lenders, are really not able to help those owners because they can't give more than the 100% of the value, and the values are low. What are some of the solutions you're looking at in terms of trying to make it easier for people to do the right thing, to buy these houses and take care of them.
Well, when the president was in town to visit the Wayne Assembly Plant, I met with him afterwards and I showed him the numbers, and he couldn't believe them. 4,000 single-family home sales in Detroit last year, and only 400 could get mortgages.
Right.
90% are cash sales, and it's because of the federal regulations. People are paying $800, $900 a month in rent, and they can't get a $500 mortgage. It makes no sense. And so we are in conversations with several national banks, and I'm optimistic we're going to have a program shortly outside of the traditional mortgage process, a home lending process that recognizes that you got a house in East English Village that they want to buy for $50,000. The appraisal says it's $40,000, but in 2008 it sold for $150,000. And so we have to find a way for a few years to get loans in until the appraisals come up, and then the market will correct itself.
But that's also true of some of the bigger development projects that people would like to do downtown. The credit's not as perhaps flowing here as fast as we would like to see it. Does that reflect a lagging in terms of the belief in Detroit by the national financial institutions?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I just did a groundbreaking at the Strathmore, 129 apartment units in a building that's been vacant for 12 years. We're breaking ground on Orleans Landing, down next to the Renaissance Center on the riverfront, drive you through Midtown. I think there is a lot of excitement about Detroit. The home mortgage problem is totally an oddity of the regulations that came out of the last financial crisis, and we're going to have to find a different solution to that.
But we're not having trouble attracting money for the big developments?
It's certainly coming in faster than I've seen it in my lifetime. Whether the business will probably tell you it's not fast enough, but it's pretty remarkable how many deals we see coming across the desk every day.
Mayor Duggan, there's been a lot of conversation about the concept of two Detroits that is taking place here in the last year, of influx of new people that are moving in, people who have been longtime residents of the city who feel maybe they're trying to grapple with what their place is in this new Detroit. Do you believe in the concept of what a new Detroit is, and what have you thought about some of the conversations you've seen take place?
I think those conversations may be good for shows like this, but I spend part of every day in a neighborhood, and the folks in the neighborhood are happy about what's going on in downtown and midtown. They just want to know, where do I fit in? But when you have the Illiches agreeing to hire 51% of all the workers building a new center out of Detroit, that helps. When the new 129-unit Strathmore apartment in Midtown commits to 40% of the units being for affordable housing, that helps. Almost all of our new units in downtown and Midtown are going to have at least a 20% affordable component. And so it's our responsibility as city leaders every day to make sure that the recovery that's happening in the city benefits everybody. We're working really hard at it, and I think we'll be successful at it.
Mayor Mike Duggan, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we turn to an important topic for the entire state, education. Improving education was front and center in Governor Snyder's State of the State address, plus a coalition of city leaders will deliver a report to the governor next month with recommendations on improving Detroit schools. The governor's education advisor, Paul Pastorek, spoke at today's policy conference, and he joins us now on MiWeek. Paul, it's good to see you, and welcome to MiWeek.
Thank you.
For many people in education circles, you are very well known. You were instrumental in turning around the New Orleans school district, but for people in Michigan may not be so familiar with your work. Can you talk a little bit about what you were able to achieve in New Orleans, and then what you're doing now here in Michigan and advising where our school system is headed?
Surely. Well, in Louisiana we had Katrina, which really upset our apple cart in the city of New Orleans, and so it was an opportunity to do something dramatically different. New Orleans was in very serious difficulty academically. The city schools were, and the governor saw it as a real opportunity to radically revamp the institutions that delivered education. She asked me if I would serve to be a part of this radical new approach, and I said yes, because the approach was not, it made a lot of sense to me. The approach was to give principals more authority to manage their school buildings and empower teachers to be able to deliver the quality of services to kids. So that has proven to be a winning formula in New Orleans, and it's proven to be copied by some others around the country, and we're very proud of it. We have a long way to go still. We're not nearly where we need to be, but we've made tremendous progress.
But bottom line is that all of the schools are charter schools now in the city of New Orleans, almost all of them?
Almost all of them are. About 92% are charter schools.
And you have improving scores in terms of grade level, and you also have improving in terms of graduation rates, but you say they're still not exactly where they need to be.
Yeah, our graduation rates were in the 50s. Now they're in the high 70s. Kids who start 9th grade and end 12th grade on time. But we know we need to do better than that. Our special ed kids, which were really lagging, are significantly improving now, but still have a ways to go. So we're very proud of the progress we've made, and it's been more than the ordinary progress that other cities have made, but we still have a long way to go.
So which parts of that make sense to you when you're looking at Detroit and other urban school districts here? Because to be honest, there are a lot of people who are very critical of what's going on in New Orleans nationally. The unions don't like it. People have looked at the progress and said, hey, over 10 years, it's okay, but it's not a model to take and put in other districts. Which parts, though, of what you're doing in New Orleans do you think would make sense in a place like Detroit?
Well, the people who do the critiques on New Orleans are good and well-intentioned people, but at the end of the day, I think if you look at the numbers, you'll find that there's a great deal of progress and a great deal of support, and so much support that we have states like Tennessee and Georgia and Nevada now that are looking to mimic what we're doing.
Doing the same kinds of things.
Doing the same kinds of things. I think the key here is, and this is not rocket science, and this is not, evil kind of stuff. I mean, why not make principals really be the leaders of the school buildings that they run? And if a principal does a really good job at that, why not give that person more schools to run? And for those who don't, then let's remove them and let's put in quality people who
But
can.
Paul, wasn't that the same theory behind the EAA, the emergency district that the governor formed? And we're now 2.5 years later getting rid of most of the principals that were hired. Getting a good principal in place isn't as easy as you make it sound, is it?
Well, the model that we have here in Michigan with an emergency manager is more of a financial model. And I have been encouraging the governor to look at bringing a strong educational component in. It's not just about cutting the budget and getting fiscal currency right, but it's about putting an education plan together which will be successful, which will lead to these kinds of fiscal cuts.
We keep hearing that Detroit is going to move toward a portfolio model. What does that mean, and does it mean an end to the Detroit Public Schools as an institution?
So a portfolio model does not mean that Detroit Public Schools ends as an institution, but what it does mean is that whichever the agency is that oversees a group of schools, like Detroit Public Schools or like university authorizers, those have to become effective, they have to become lean, they have to become not operators of schools where they command and control from above, but where they empower schools to deliver the success to kids. And when the DPS begins to really empower the principals and leaders to make decisions around finance, around curriculum and instruction, then we're going to see, I think, a lot of progress, and we're seeing that happen in other places in the country.
All right, so you have been consulting here in Michigan since the summertime, and the Broad Foundation is actually paying for you to be here in the state. Who have you been talking to? What have been some of your, most productive meetings? I can only assume that you've been doing a lot of listening. When can we see maybe some recommendations coming from you and coming out of the governor's office?
Yeah, we have done some remarkable conversations with people. I've met with the Superintendents Association, many urban environments around the state, because the governor is not solely focused on Detroit. He's focused on urban challenges all across the state. So just yesterday I met with representatives of multiple superintendents. There are other urban environments that are challenged. I've been able to talk to community leaders, philanthropy, business people, the chamber as I'm here today. And, I think that people want what is right for the kids here in Detroit. But the challenge is to let go of some of the past institutions that we have and look for new institutions that are going to be 21st century focused, really focused, kids-based and not adult-based. And I think when we do that, we'll see much better things coming.
Is there a danger or a fear, though, that people in the community feel that maybe they won't be part of those decisions that are being made about their schools?
It's natural for people to have anxiety when there's a lot of change. And so we will see that there will be people, all kinds of adults, who will see some sort of anxiety in this. That's normal and natural. But what the news effort that the coalition puts forth and the governor comes to agreement on and others around the state come to support, that's going to have to be mindful of the community. It's going to have to bring heavy engagement from the community so the community understands that change does not mean bad, change means good.
What are some of the things that didn't work that you tried in New Orleans that you've learned and said, hey, we won't do that again, or we certainly won't try to export that to other cities?
I think the pace of change is very important and holding standards very high. So when you go to a school that is not doing well and you want to replace the operator of that school, a principal or a group of people or a charter, it could be one of any of those, you have to be very thoughtful and careful about who you allow to come in and to run that operation.
Now
and that requires a lot of care.
And so have you seen...
We can improve based on that.
Seen instances in New Orleans where you brought the wrong person in?
Yes, we have. We've made mistakes along the way. Yeah. Now, you have to take risks, but you want to minimize those risks, but you want to try and reduce that as much as you can.
Last question, Nolan.
Okay, so you said portfolio models are in place and around the country now. What governance model works best with a portfolio system?
Well, I think the key is to try to depoliticize the environment around the running of schools. And oftentimes it gets into a big adult game where people argue about whose adult rights are going to be abridged in the course of schooling. And we've got to remember the primary focus of schooling is to educate kids and elevate those rights. And I think when we do, we find success.
All right, Paul Pastorek, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing more at the end of March.
Thank you very much.
With the city just a couple of months out of bankruptcy, the conversation at this year's policy conference is about continuing Detroit's momentum. How can the city and the region work together to build a new Detroit? How do we grow business and include everyone in the city's rebirth? And how can we revitalize Detroit's neighborhoods? All important questions for Detroit's future. All right, guys, we've heard a lot here today, and specifically coming from the mayor. He's very upbeat. He knows how to really capture a room and make people feel this momentum going forward. Do you buy into it?
Yeah, I think I buy into the pieces that are working, the pieces that he's talking about. But the pieces that he's really not talking that much about is money. There's not that much money to do all the things that we need to do in Detroit, especially in the neighborhoods, to keep people here and to grow. He said during the panel, the Q&A with me in the theater, that he's gone to Washington to ask for more money, and he doesn't know that it's going to actually show up. I think if revenues don't improve the way we think they will over the next couple of years, we could be back in a lot of trouble.
He's got a very brief reprieve here coming out of bankruptcy where there's enough revenue to pay the bills. That so rarely has happened in Detroit over the last 20 years. But he's in this little grace period. He needs 3 years of balanced budgets to get out from under state financial control. He's good this year. He told us he's good next year. But in the third year, it gets iffy because he's not, they project, Kevin Orr projected 2% a year revenue growth in income tax. It's flat. Now, property tax is growing, whether that'll be enough to cover it, but there's real uncertainty about future revenue. If he gets to the point where he has to start cutting some of these new initiatives, cutting back on services after telling people we're going to head in this direction, I think he's really got to try to avoid that.
Yeah, but I think he has tempered it a little bit with the reality of what they're facing. But he can't come out and be like, well,
No, he can't.
I don't know, this is not
gotta
going to work. I
cheerlead.
mean, he's got that, and I think he's also giving himself saying, look, I'm accountable for this as well, and I'm gonna own
So
this.
he's
He's not
gotta-
sidestepping it and saying, well, these problems were here before I got here, and I can't do much more.
He's got to hang on to his residents, and he's got to show them constant progress, which is why the revenue situation is so critical. He can't get to the point where he's cutting back on police service. He can't get to the point where he cuts back on garbage collection or response times start going back up. That would be just a death knell.
Big key in growing the city, we've also talked about this, and you made that point to him, Nolan, was education and the schools, and making sure that families that move in here have proper education for their kids. And that brings us kind of to the next pillar of what we're talking about here on the show today. And speaking with Paul and seeing what this eventual plan is for the Detroit schools, Stephen, do you think that we're going to see something radically different, much like the radical change that happened in New Orleans
I
under
think
his
it will
watch?
be really different than what we're used to. I don't know how much it'll look like New Orleans. I think the reaction to what has happened in New Orleans has not been as universally positive as Paul Pastorek might spin it to be, and I think the governor's aware of that people like local control and local buy-in, and that's what they felt like got shut out in New Orleans.
Last quick word.
They're fixing to drop a bomb on this school district, and we'll see if people are desperate enough for improved education that they'll accept a radical fix, or they'll keep fighting it. That's the big question here in the next couple months.
And we will have to see what happens at the end of March. And that is going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to continue our conversation online right now after the show, so go to MiWeek.org for an extra segment you won't see on TV. We're also on Facebook and Twitter during the week, so make sure you connect with us there. I'm Christy McDonald. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, we will see you next week. Take care.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta,